Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chafee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically.
Hello and welcome to the To Carnivore podcast. I'm your host, Simon Lewis, and you're tuning into the Plant-Free MD series with Dr. Anthony Chafee. Dr. Chafee is a surgeon, nutritional researcher, and former pro rugby player. He's been strict carnivore for 3 years and an on and off carnivore for more than 20. Dr. Chafee looks and feels like a real-life superhero. If losing fat, building muscle, finding focus, and getting the most out of life is important to you, you're going to love the Plant-Free MD series.
Yeah, talking about food in hospitals, I saw these ads that were released by the American Meat Association back in the 40s and 50s. Yep. I don't know if you saw that. I shared on Insta, and one of them was like meat for the convalescents, and it was like this soldier in the image was a soldier in a hospital bed, and he's got like this tray on top of him, and it's just like all this meat, and it's like, you know, meat helps our soldiers with wounds and burns and injuries heal faster. That's, you know, so we can get them back to full strength. Yeah. These days of the food in hospitals, like you were saying.
No, it's just carbs and sugar. That's it. Yeah, almost no protein, almost no meat, definitely no fat. And you know, if it is, it's margarine. You know, it's plant oils. But that's the thing. I mean, this was not a secret. This was not even a question. Like we've just known this for thousands and thousands of years. It was always understood that meat was the healthiest thing you could eat. That was the best thing for you. And, you know, eating plants was, you know, for, you know, added spice or flavor, or really to cover, you know, when the spices were to cover up the taste of rotting meat, because we didn't have refrigeration, you needed to eat meat. And so it was just to cover up that taste of rotting meat. But otherwise, it's, you know, it was just if you were poor and you didn't have access to meat. You know, now it's like, oh, no, that's what you really, really want. Probably because people are making trillions of dollars on people eating this nonsense. But, you know, and there may be more to it than that, trying to sort of weaken people globally. You know, it's happened. You know, there are people that do try to manipulate others and try to make them weak. You know, you keep people ignorant, you keep them under control, and you keep
subservient.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, this is, you know, we have gotten way too comfortable with, you know, modern democracies that have historically worked fairly well, but people forget that the most of human history is you know, rife with despotic overlords and people that are just megalomaniacs trying to control, domineer, and enslave.
Yeah, and I think definitely in Western countries like Australia and the States, we just take it for granted that, as you say, we've got this reasonably well-functioning democracy where people wouldn't go out of their way to do nasty, controlling things like that. But that kind of makes us more susceptible. Like, I don't know if you saw Pran shares some great stuff about like Indians being vegetarians. And like he talks about like during colonization, the English like drove the Indians out of their forests where they got a lot of their game meat and where their animals could roam, and drove them out of there. So you can't go and you can't work and you can't hunt in there anymore. Instead, you're going to work for us. We're going to pay you in grain. Right. And then, of course, you know, their health plummets, the number of livestock and animals that they have reduces. And then somewhere along the way, they start thinking that they're a vegetarian country, and that this vegetarian way of life is good for them. But, you know, am I right in saying that India has the highest rate of diabetes of anywhere in the world? I'm pretty sure they've got a shocking.
It's one of the higher ones. I don't know if it's the highest, but you know, it's certainly on the rise. It's significantly risen in recent decades, as has China and other areas. And so these places, you know, people look at obesity rates as that's the end all be all. And so they look at America and Australia and England and the other Western countries. But, you know, that's not the only indicator of poor health. And in fact, there are people that are overweight, because this goes by the BMI. I'm overweight, I'm obese, according to the BMI. Even though I'm lean, but that's just how the BMI works. It's not a great metric, but that's one we use. And so people are have less weight in proportion to their height, which is what the BMI is in India and China, but at the same time they are have a very high diabetes rate, and the metabolic disease, metabolic syndrome, are on the climb in these countries, even though they're not as overweight. And that could be for many reasons. Maybe they just don't have as many big, tall, muscular people either. But either way, they're sick, and so they do have a very high obesity rate. I was talking to a doctor from India that I knew in Europe, and sort of talking about the fructose research of Dr. Lustig, a decade ago or more, and he was like, oh, that's really interesting, that there's research is showing that fructose causes metabolic disease, because where I come from in India, there's actually this whole province that you have just so many mango trees. They're just abundant, they just grow wild, that for like 3 months out of the year when these things are ripe, like everyone there just eats mangoes. They hardly eat anything else. They just eat so many mangoes. And they have the highest diabetes rate in India, which is already a very high diabetes ridden country. And to the point that the government recognized this and recognized it was the mangoes, and actually made an ordinance that like limiting the amount of mangoes that people were allowed to eat because of that. And so this is not new. This is something that people have recognized well before the studies came out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't know how this is all getting lost in the ether of
asthma. What's just being papered over? It's being intentionally papered over. We had the cholesterol being vilified by the sugar companies, and that was a purposeful act. It's still a purposeful act. People have invested trillions, and they make trillions every year on the sale of their products. And if their products are crap and they cause harm, people are going to buy them less. And so what they do is they vilify the opponent. It's like the Nazi tactics of blaming your opponent for what you yourself are doing, so that they might say, no, you're doing it. And they say, no, you're just retaliating. You're just, everyone knows that you're the ones doing this. And that's how it's been. It's difficult, but it comes around because the truth will out, and the facts are there, the evidence is there, and people's results are there, and they're real. And when you're eating one way and you're getting fat and sick, and you eat another way and you get extremely healthy and strong, people are going to pay attention to that, and they should.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there's at least a little bit of a shift happening. I mean, like, there's so much kind of bullshit happening in the plant-based space that I think people are wearing of it. Like I keep seeing things like on Instagram today. I saw like it's called like the plant-based avocado, and it was like,
oh my god, yeah,
someone had made an avocado out of
plant-based avocado. Is it so avocados aren't plant-based already?
No, I don't know. Like it was like extra processed. Like it was like environmental. Yeah, and so it was like made from like, I don't know, bean pulp and vegetable oils, and then designed to look like an avocado. Like, how can anyone think that's first of all more sustainable, more healthy, or a good idea at all?
Look, I cut it and mold it into the shape of food. That makes it food, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
To buy that.
You know how, I don't know if you've seen any of those sort of like really top chefs, and they create like these wondrous little meals, and there's like dry ice and foam and stuff coming out of them, and they will like create like something that looks like an apple, but it's actually a chocolate cake, and that's kind of like a bit of a culinary adventure. But people are now doing that with our everyday food, and it somehow seemed to be interesting or desirable. Like, you do not need a hot dog that's made from plant protein and seed oils and all sorts of crap left over on the factory floor. That's a weird time.
I just like the butchers who were coming around making meat-based carrots and things like that. And, hey, look at this! I formed this hamburger into the shape of a carrot, and like, oh, that makes it a carrot. So that's good. And it's funny as hell. There was back when I still thought that fat was bad for you. There was a Saturday Night Live thing where they had these like I think it was like the show was called like Two Fat Ladies or something like that. And there were these these overweight ladies, but they obviously like cooking, and they had this cooking show, and Saturday Night Live was sort of making a joke on that, and so they had people playing them, and they were talking about like, oh, how we're trying to make like healthy food. So talking about salad, and it was like salad was invented by an evil little man in the 1800s who like made up some fake backstory on it. And they're like, but they made it out of, like, some sort of like, meat product or whatever. And then they said, it's like, and then rice cakes are supposed to be very healthy for you, but we don't have rice. So we made them out of pig fat. And they just have these little patties of lard. And it's, it's funny, because you're thinking that these people are unhealthy and they're cooking in an unhealthy way. And it's not, a silly portrayal of that. The funny thing is that everything that those people had actually put out in substitute of like the salad and the rice cakes were like actually what's good for you, which is like the irony. Yeah. Which I think is funny.
Well, dude, you've kind of just gotten back from KetoCon. So how was it?
KetoCon was great. I really enjoyed it. It was the first time I'd been to a convention like that. Really any convention. I've sort of been through a couple conventions, just of random things, but never really spent much time there. So this one was really good. There was a ton of really great speakers that had very interesting perspectives and points of view, and brought a lot of great information and evidence for to support what they were talking about. Some weren't even talking about that. They were talking about building communities and importance of sticking together in a society, especially through the lockdowns and the forced isolation, and how harmful that can be, both mentally and physically. So there was a bunch of really good things. It was also really interesting just to meet everyone. I was able to meet a whole bunch of different people that I'd spoken to on podcasts, like Judy Cho, Dr. Baker, Kevin Stock, and many others. 8A Fox, Black Carnivore, and a ton of other people, and then meet new people that I hadn't interacted with before and hadn't met before, like Metabolic Mike is a good guy. Turns out this guy, that he actually lives where I grew up in Kirkland. So he's actually from the same area where I grew up, and he went to sort of a neighboring high school.
Oh wow.
And we're just like a few years apart. So
did you go back to his place and do the ice baths and stuff?
Yeah. So he has a house in Kirkland where I grew up. And everyone knows how much I love Costco. Costco is Kirkland's signature. That's their brand name. That's because the original Costco is in Kirkland. And
no wonder you love Costco so much.
Yeah. No, it's like, it's been a part of my life for decades.
There we go.
And literally been going there since I, for 30 years, I mean, since I was like 9 years old. So he has a house there. It's a really cool setup because it's in Kirkland. Kirkland was getting, very much developed, but it's sort of still in this sort of really sort of wooded neighborhood area, which is what Kirkland really was for a long time, which is nice. So it's in Kirkland. It's very close to Seattle, but you feel like you're out, in the country almost. And he's got a cool setup there. He's got this wood-fired sauna, which is awesome. Then he's got this ice bath thing. It was just like, Jesus Christ, that thing was cold. That was it was literally 1 degree, and maybe a half a degree. And so we were in the sauna, for like, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes, something like that. Got nice and toasty, got a good sweat on, and then just like punished ourselves by going in this ice bath, and you're going from that one extreme to the other like that. That's like the wrong direction on those extremes. Like I don't want to, like
you don't want to be that hot, you don't want to be that cold.
Yeah, and well, I'm happy being hot, but like going from really hot to like absurdly cold is like it's a big jump from just like room temperature, outside atmosphere to, you know, going into the cold water. Like, oh, that's really cold. But now you're just like you shocked your system because you went from a place, you know, it's like 170 degrees Fahrenheit and you're going down into 33 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, yeah, your body lets you know that there's something going wrong. And but you know, like normally, like with ice baths, like you sort of numb up and you just sort of like, okay, I can get to the point where I'm like, okay, I can deal with this. I did not numb up. I did not get to the point where I was handling this very well. It's just like it just got more and more painful, and I was in it for like, I don't know, like 3 minutes or so, and something I wasn't really counting. It felt like an eternity. But like by the time I was getting out, like I was so cold. I was like a lizard in torpor. It was like I just like needed to just like bask. I couldn't get up. I was moving so slowly. I was like struggling just to like pull myself.
I feel like you've definitely overdone it for your first kind of, you know, getting back into ice baths and sauna. You've gone from 0 to 100 straight up.
Yeah. Well, it was because I went first, and I was like, well, how long are you supposed to stay in there? It's like, oh, as long as you want. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'll get out now then. And but you know, so I just stayed in there, and I was just like, all right, I wanted to get to the point of just numbing up and being able to just like carry it. And eventually I was like, okay, I'm
it's not coming. It's not coming.
And, you know, and so I ended up staying longer than some of the other guys do. So apparently, you know, you don't need to stay in that long, but it was, it got to the point where I was so cold out. I warmed up enough to realize how freezing I was. My body just starts like just shaking, and I was like trying to speak, and like my voice was like shaky and stuttering because like it got so cold. But then you know, warm up in the sauna.
The sauna, yeah,
it's nice. But then like my core was super cold, and so it was like heating it from the outside, but the core on the inside was super cold. So I don't know. It was a weird contrast, but it felt good. I had sort of a bit of a buzz, you know. I was like sort of like giddy and lightheaded for a while after that. It was kind of interesting. But yeah, but you know, meeting people like him and everyone else, it was a really good experience. And then just going to the talks, I really enjoyed the talks. It's a shame that they weren't able to record them. Because there were a lot that I missed that I couldn't see because I was engaged elsewhere. And I was just like, I would really like to see that.
How come they didn't record it? Surely they should sell like, you know, a highlight video or access to it, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's just a budgetary issue. It does cost a lot to record these things and to, you know, get like an AV team to put them together and publish them out. But you know, they you know, because of COVID, you know, they haven't been able to do this for the last couple of years. And you know, the convention center said, yeah, you can do it. So they put all this money down and did all these deposits, and people started buying tickets. And then the convention center, no, we're canceling it. Just canceled it. Didn't refund any money. And so just, yeah, exactly. And so, you know, the KetoCon couldn't. This is all what I've heard through the grapevine. Anyway, I don't have any hard facts on this, but what I heard was, you know, because, you know, the convention center canceled everything and didn't refund anything, you know, KetoCon, you know, couldn't refund all the money to people too, and so that like really pissed people off, and it happened 2 years in a row. And so like this year they didn't get the same numbers that they have in previous years, and their budget wasn't the same. So it's you know, but it was still very popular. It's still, you know, we had like, you know, 2,500-3,000 people there. So it was yeah, it was really good. And you know, for you know, keto convention, it's still one of the larger ones. I think KetoCon is the largest one. Certainly has been in previous years.
But I feel like it could be so much bigger. Like you think about how big the kind of like keto, paleo, carnivore movement is across the world. And it was in Austin, right? And Austin's a pretty desirable place these days. Like surely you get 20,000 people through the door. So it'd be interesting to see what they do next year, because
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I think this year was pretty good.
I'd be happy with it.
Success. Yeah, I think people were
Yeah.
happy. And so, hopefully, it's yeah, it just gets bigger and bigger. Um, there are other sort of keto conferences, like in Australia, there's Low Carb Down Under, which I'll be
Yeah.
speaking at as well in October. So it's like the weekend of October
Is
16th
that on the Gold Coast?
on Gold Coast. Yeah.
All right, I'll come to that.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
make a weekend of
definitely.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and anyone in Australia that's around, you should definitely go there, especially people up in Queensland, and anyone who's able to make the trip. It's very, very science based. Like Low Carb Down Under was started by um, really doctors in Australia that were had come across this and be like, hey, this is really good for patients. This is really getting people better. And we're really interested in the science behind ketosis and getting into that metabolic state, and then doing research in it. And you have a ton of people, like Dr. Paul Mason, and Baker's come over as well, and I think Tim Noakes, and even Professor Thomas Seyfried just interviewed. He's
Oh,
done
wow.
talks for Low Carb Down Under as well. And so this is it's a very, very, very scientifically based um, conference, and so it's it's very interesting, for obviously doctors and clinicians and scientists, but really anyone, because it's not like going over your head. There's a lot of these things that are explained in very straightforward terms, but they are backed by hard evidence. So I think that's really appealing. It's really appealing to me anyway, and I've really
Yeah,
liked
you've got me fired up. That sounds
yeah.
great. Yeah, particularly like the sort of top doctors talking.
Mm, yeah. And so they've got a really good lineup this year. People can check them out online. I think it's just lowcarbdownunder .com, possibly .au, but
People will find it. Type into Google.
yeah. And but it's very scientifically based, and they have a big YouTube page, and like a bunch of talks on there, and that's where they get a lot of their traction from, is on there,
Yeah, I
because
watched a lot of those videos. They're great. Yeah.
they are very, very good. They're very well presented, and they back it up. They back up the facts, and so that's the kind of thing that I like to see.
Yeah, Paul, Dr. Mason and
Mm,
Dr. Gary Fetka. I think they've both got really good videos.
mm.
Anthony? Are you presenting?
Yeah, I'll be presenting as
Yeah,
well.
okay, awesome.
Yeah. And yeah, that's how I came across Dr. Paul Mason. I was very, very impressed. And I was very
Yeah,
I really like his talks, and
it's a real deal.
yeah, I really like how he presents things, and just the interesting sort of things. He's like, hey, check this out. Bet you never heard of that. And it's like, and it's a very, very yeah, interesting addition. And yeah, and so yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that, and hopefully meeting everybody there, and hopefully giving a good talk. That you there? Did I lose you?
Yeah, I got you back now.
Okay.
So at KetoCon, Anthony, how was Carnivore received? Because obviously, most of the people there, I imagine, would have been into the keto diet, or was it more like a carnivore conference? Or what was the vibe?
Well, I think there's a mix, but there was definitely a lot of carnivore, carnivore influenced people, and people that were very interested in carnivore as well. I think it's the logical next step
Yeah, for sure.
in keto, because well, I mean, you can do a vegetarian keto. Obviously, it's just no carbs, but most people do a meat-based one, a meat-based high fat keto diet. Most people do, and they just have vegetables. And so they're understanding that meat is good, fat is healthy, and
Right.
that cholesterol is good for you. And they recognize that carbs and sugar are bad for you. Like, okay, so that those things are bad for me. it's, it's a very, very short step to, well, there are other things that are bad for you too, like for example. So I think a lot of people are getting more interested in that. And a lot of people, especially on their sort of health journey and weight loss journey, who go to keto, they'll have very, very good results, but they'll sort of stall at a certain point. They're like, oh, I'm so much better than I was, but then I'm just not really getting over this hump of where I'm at. And they go, okay, well, maybe I'll try cutting out even more and going carnivore. And they go, oh, okay, wow. And that just really, takes them off.
And that is a growing group of people.
Yeah.
Like, I think before doing the 30-day carnivore challenge with you, like I didn't realize how many people had, they've given keto a go and now they want more. And as you say, their results have plateaued. And so now they really want to see what life would be like, strict carnivore. So many people, and there must be tens of thousands of people who fall into that category out there, and they're curious.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're talking to each other. They're in these keto forums. They go to KetoCon and they go to other, low carb Denver and whatever.
Yeah.
And they talk to each other. They're like, wow, yeah, I went ultra keto, aka carnivore, and I'm even better than I was. And so, I think that's the idea of plant toxins is becoming more well known in those communities, especially, very logical that people are going to look at that and go, okay, hey, there's more out there that I need to cut out if I want to be optimal. So yeah, so there's a lot of people that were carnivore. I certainly had a lot of people, come up to me that have, watched our podcasts and watched our interviews and, they see my YouTube videos and,
oh, really? Yeah, great.
Yeah, a ton of people, and that I've interacted with, on social media and Instagram and Facebook. And so I was actually able to meet these people face to face, which was really nice, because like, I really appreciated those interactions with people. I really enjoyed talking to people and really been excited for them when they, tell me about, all the different ways that their lives are improving by going carnivore, which is, it's really, really nice to see. And then you meet them in person and it's like, it's even better because you're like, you get to see the person there and talk to them face to face, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, fantastic. That'd be really satisfying. Okay, so definitely a lot of interest in carnivore.
Yeah.
Who did you? Is there anyone that you saw speak that you were really impressed by?
Yeah, well, I obviously saw Dr. Baker speak, and he did a great job as always. He's an old hand at this, and he did a good talk on just sort of talking about food systems and this big push for this fake meat and the grain-based whatever and like the sort of the attack on our food supply lines and our food systems and this sort of corruption of our food systems. And so he gave a very interesting talk there. And there was one guy in particular that I really enjoyed listening to. Was he was very, very interesting, was Dr. Bill Schindler, who is an archaeologist and a professor of archaeology. He actually lived in Dublin. He was adjunct professor at University College in Dublin, which is sort of right across. Yeah, which is right across the way from where I lived, and so yeah, he was very interesting, and he did a whole talk on just the ancient peoples and cultures and civilizations and, the tools that you use and how we, the evidence for how we know what they ate and how they lived, which is very strong. And he, even did a tutorial on how to make stone tools and how these ancient peoples millions of years ago and hundreds of thousands to millions of years ago made stone tools and the ones that they used. And they actually have very, very hard evidence to show this is how they made the tools. These are the tools they used. This is the way that they used, and making like obsidian knives and things like that. Obsidian, yeah, wow. Apparently, I always knew it was sharp as hell, but I didn't really realize how sharp it was. It is the sharpest thing that exists that we can make. The edge of the blade gets 1 molecule thick.
Jesus Christ! So
And
you
like
can obviously split anything with that. Anything on our shop.
anything.
What is obsidian, like a type of rock, or?
It's a rock, yeah.
Rock, yeah.
And it's brittle, so you'll lose your edge pretty quickly. But until you do, that thing is sharp
Crazy
as
sharp.
hell. And so we actually do use these things sometimes in like special, like, cosmetic surgery cases. They'll use actual obsidian scalpels because
Wow.
they have such a fine cut that they leave like, perfect scar. Well, perfect, but they leave really, really, really fine scars or minimal scarring because it's just how precise these things are. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. Yeah, he was making these things, right there in front of us. And so I really liked him. He's I did a couple things where I had like on Instagram where I had his book, Eat Like a Human.
Mm. I
And
gotta get that.
yeah, and he just shows like, hey, this is how humans eat, and
So is he carnivore or sort of paleo?
more paleo,
Yeah.
but a lot of meat,
Yeah.
and but he shows, like this is sort of people sort of had fermented dairy products for a very long time, and before that would really just have been eating meat, but maybe some plants here and there, but mostly what we're just eating is meat. And then certainly in the ice times, I've come across people that have tried to argue, because they say, oh, you have to have plants, you have to have carbs, you have to have fruit or honey to live. And I just point out, I was like, how did that work during the ice ages? How did the Eskimos do it, or the Inuit? And how do people come across the Bering Strait over the land bridge, with all that? And one of the common rebuttals to that, attempts at rebutting, is that they say like, oh, well, when the ice age came down, everyone moved towards the equator. Bullshit. Dr. Schindler actually showed very, very clearly that the fossil record shows the opposite of that. It shows that the people actually moved up when the ice sheets were coming down. That they moved up. Let's just pause this for 2 seconds. Wasn't.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so Dr. Schindler showed that no, when the ice sheets were coming down, people were moving up. They were moving into the ice. So that just completely.
Why? Did he give a reason?
He didn't say specifically in that that instance, but I mean, we were mammoth hunters. We were big game hunters. We were going after the megafauna, and that's where they were. And so we also had control of fire at that point. And so
Okay, so it's like at least at night, if you can find a cave or you can build an igloo or something, you've got a fire at night, you can survive up there.
yeah, well, that's it. And they had obviously we're getting furs from the animals that they were hunting, and they also had fires. Apparently, we've had fires. When I looked this up a while ago, and I was very interested in it, that there was like records of like big hearth fires and cook fires, going back 800,000 years, which is 500,000 years before Homo sapiens existed. But there's actually more evidence that goes back even further, like 1.5 million years at least, maybe even 2 million years. And so that's wild. And so, but the fires were kept perpetually. It wasn't like you were just starting a fire every day. It was actually very difficult.
Okay, right. It ran all day, all night.
All day, all night. So they'd bank the fire, so it would just be like some embers, and then they'd feed some tinder on it and grow it up and build it up, and then they'd have this big fire. So fire was going on for centuries, maybe even thousands of years in certain cultures, and but years anyway. And so it's it was always kept going. So fire is a very, very important thing. And that was just as a complete aside, I've always thought about mythology and different stories that we have in different cultures, different creation myths. Every single society has some sort of fire myth, like Prometheus giving fire to humans and Zeus being angry at this because this would raise humans to the level of gods, and they would rival the gods with their power because fire was so important. And all the other ones, they show how extremely important fire was. And you think about this, you think about the fact that fire, we have, very good evidence that fire has been around for 1.5 million years, maybe 2 million years. That's incredible to think about, because there were people alive with similar intelligence to us, similar enough to be able to come up with myths and legends and pass down oral tradition, and know people that were there before fire and how horrible and miserable that was. And then after fire, like, whoa, this just changes everything. And remember that and just pass that down like this was the biggest deal that has ever happened to our people. And then that myth gets passed on. So these myths are probably millions of years old, and obviously they would have changed and transformed and sort of grown into their own.
That's like the ultimate technology shift, isn't it? It's like, we know people who knew life before the internet.
Yeah.
And some people who knew life before the electricity. A few generations ago. Imagine that life before we could harness fire. We didn't just get burnt down in bushfires, but we could actually make one when we wanted one.
So it was a major revolution, like the Industrial Revolution or the technology revolution, and that was the first major one. Maybe tools was a major revolution as well that changed things, but fire was a big one. And so this just shows in our mythology as well. And I think of other sort of creation myths, like the Aboriginal Australians. They have very, very interesting stories about the dream time. Everything was a dream. Well, I don't know enough about this, but it sort of has always interested me to think about it in a way that maybe these, there was a time, and this is coming from an evolutionary standpoint. Obviously, people think of things in a creationist standpoint, and that's fine. But if we are thinking about things in an evolutionary standpoint, there was a time when there were early humans and there were people that were not quite humans, and they had intelligence that was separate from other animals, but it wasn't quite on the level of being able to have this consciousness that we have now. So there was a shift at some point where you go from unconscious existence to conscious existence, and you have this dream time while everyone was living a dream. It was just this sort of, everything was nice and it's wonderful, you're just going around running around the bushes and everything like that, and then all of a sudden it's real, and it's like, okay, and now you're out of the dream and you're awake, and that might be talking about that shift and transition in consciousness. I hope I don't piss people off here, but even thinking about things like Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge and good and evil, everything's happy and they're just living this nature's bounty and everything like that. Then they eat this animal or this apple, and all of a sudden they recognize that they're naked, and they understand the difference between good and evil. That's a serious concept. It's not apparent that other animals in nature understand the concept of good and bad or morality. They're just worried about survival and protecting themselves and their family, and that's it. Which is a sort of moral in many ways, but it's obviously not as deep as the understanding that we have, or some of us have. So I just think that might be explaining something like that, where we were just sort of all out in nature, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, we're different. There's something different here, and you're naked, and you probably put something on, and so I think I keep thinking like maybe these are explaining those transitions. But if you look at that was millions of years ago, millions and millions of years ago. So I don't know. I think that's interesting anyway, but other people may get upset at that. I hope they don't. But it's just me sort of thinking out loud anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to think about there, isn't there? And particularly when you're thinking in millions of years, I certainly can't get my head around it. It's hard enough thinking sort of 2,000 years back, but thinking millions of years back is very challenging.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the Iliad and the Odyssey. These were created before we had a written tradition. These were prehistoric poems, and they were, in very complex, I think it was like hexameter verse. Like, it was very, very intricate and brilliant poetry that was passed down orally. And there's like 1,000 pages to the Iliad, and the same to the Odyssey. These are big, big, long, and they were poems the whole way through, and people memorized these things. And those weren't the only thing they memorized. They had a lot of other things in their head as well. And so, Gilgamesh and all these things. Gilgamesh is interesting. That's one of the earliest written stories that we have. And it's of time, like 6,000 years ago or more, or that's when it was written. 6,000, anyway, a long ass time ago. And it talks about a city in modern day Iraq or thereabouts that was in these lush fields and forests and everything like that, in this city with these old walls that are older than anyone could remember, and these ancient cities, ancient walls, all these sorts of things. And this is an ancient story that's talking about how old their civilization was. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah. And that was, they're saying it's still like 2,500 BC.
Okay, so like 4,500 years ago.
Exactly, yeah.
And,
so and they thought they were ancient at the time. Jeez, we go back a long way, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, and they probably were ancient,
Well, sorry, they could acknowledge that they were.
Yeah, like the pyramids. Some of these things are like 5,000 years old. It's Giza, and so you had a very, very established, sophisticated, thriving society that was able to build these monoliths. So
I mean, we're lucky today because we can still get a glimpse into what people have been doing for these thousands of years. When I was on the plane coming back from Europe, I watched this great doco about Inuits, and it was like these Inuit kids who'd gone to Western school in the town nearby, and then in the school holidays they go back to visit their family. And so it's like 4 kids, and the oldest kid jumps on their not jet ski. What do you call them? Jet ski.
Snowmobile.
Snowmobile. Jumps on the snowmobile, and they've got like this crate in the back that's on skis. The other 3 kids jump in the back of the crate, and then he just drives them back to his village.
Yeah.
It takes him like 10 hours going along these paths, and just in the white wilderness, but he instinctively knows where he's going until he eventually gets to the teepee or the home in the middle of just vast emptiness, and it's literally wooden poles, and then they've got reindeer skins all the way around. And to enter, mum and dad are there. They've now got 3 new siblings, so it's a big family now. Fire in the middle, blankets everywhere, and welcome home.
Nice.
And then the first thing they do the next day is like to celebrate having all the kids there, the 7 kids. They go to the reindeer herd, kill one of the reindeer, and then butcher it in the snow and just tuck into the raw reindeer meat. And that's like welcome home. You need your strength.
Yeah.
They don't save. They save it, every little bit of it. Like they're collecting the blood.
Yeah.
In like little canisters, and they're eating the kidneys and livers. And pretty amazing. That's still taking place today.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I mean, this is how people lived for so many generations, and and again, where were the fruit and honey and carbs and celery and everything like that up there in the Arctic North? Like, it just didn't exist, and so yeah, it's always interesting to see how these people lived, and it's always great to see people in contact. That was sort of thing with Bill Schindler, was like he this guy knows how these people live. He did a show actually on National Geographic that I think it's available on Amazon Prime for purchase. I was actually planning on buying the season of it. It was called The Great Human Race. And
I saw that on his website. Yeah, it looks cool.
And so he they took him around, like, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, and went to these different parts of Africa. It's like, okay, you know, this many millions of years ago, our ancestors were here and they had these stone tools, they had this technology, and he and the partner would just like live out there like that. And then go to a different part. Okay, now you're, you know, 500,000 years in the future, you have these stone tools, and these are the stone tools that these people would have had, and this is the technology they would have had, and this is how they would have lived, and they just show it. They just live out there like these people, and they just, you know, keep going and going and going, and so it sounded really, really cool. And so this is all evidence based, you know. So it's yeah, it's very, very interesting seeing that sort of thing and seeing how people live, and just seeing this. It's like, this is, I mean, it's, as I said in my talk at KetoCon, this was never controversial before very recent times. You know, that humans were carnivores, were apex predators. I was taught that when I was a school kid. Humans are apex predators, top of the food chain. This, I mean, there's an abundance of evidence for this, that you know, this was just a very well established fact. It's only been challenged, and it's fair to challenge things. That's fine. You bring new evidence to the table, and that changes your understanding of something. Challenge away. But this was a challenge of another sort, which was, you know, the vilification of meat via cholesterol from the sugar companies, and this was fraud. This was based on fraud. So now there's this commercial aggression towards meat and eating meat in order to perpetuate their own vested interests in sugar and plant-based products. And so, you know, that's a very different challenge. And it's a very,
people are getting very sick because of it.
Very, very sick. You know, I think that these sorts of things, like, you know, that USDA declaration has probably caused more harm and suffering than nearly anything else. Certainly in you know, my understanding of history. You know, you're talking about billions of people that have been, you know, completely derailed in their health, living shorter lives, getting sick and fat and unwell and suffering and having depression and anxiety and psychiatric illnesses, you know, bad joints, painful arthritis, bad backs, you know, needing to get spinal fusions and surgeries, diabetes, autoimmune issues, you know, defecating just blood 20 times a day, even with medications, rheumatoid arthritis, where you get such bad arthritis that your joints decay and deform to where they're not recognizable or even usable anymore. And then, you know, Alzheimer's and autism, where our children's brains aren't developing properly, and they're living their entire lives in a truncated fashion when they wouldn't have had to. They didn't need to. This shouldn't have happened. And then, you know, people growing up and losing their faculties, and elderly becoming dependent and ridden in homes, and dependent on nursing care facilities, and getting to the point where they can't even control their own defecation and waste, and they need to be changed and cleaned like a child in a diaper. You know, it's such an undignified way, and then they to live, and then they die. You know, the amount of suffering this has caused, and the amount of human years lost, is incalculable. It's absolutely staggering. Yeah.
Well, it was a clear message. Get off the processed shit and eat fat,
That's
right?
Yeah. Well, you know, and, you know, just like, you know, I mean, I obviously am for a very strict carnivore diet, because I think that's optimal. I think that humans certainly can eat other things, and probably have eaten other ways in, you know, historically, prehistorically, but generally it's because they needed to, you know, and you know, a lot of the records are such that you know, the primitive populations alive now, or in the last few hundred years, they've only eaten plants when they've absolutely had to, or used it medicinally. And so if you're looking for optimization, you know, I definitely think that carnivore is the way to go. That will give you the most bang for your buck, the most nutrients, and the most benefit, and none of the downfall that plants are going to give you with the defense chemicals. So that's definitely going to be you know, what I promote and what I you know, try to recommend to people, and certainly what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and you do a very good job. Sort of to add to that, a lot of the people who follow you and love listening to you, they have major health issues, and the best way for them to overcome, well, in my opinion, from my experience, the best way for them to overcome and regain their health is through strict carnivore. And you know, it's a total elimination diet and prioritizing nutrient dense meat and fat that isn't inflammatory and doesn't cause issues with your gut or your joints or your mental health. It really soothes and satiates your body.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just such an effective message for those people who are suffering from mental health, diabetes, obesity, arthritis, Alzheimer's, all those things that you mentioned before.
Yeah, and autoimmune as well.
Autoimmune, so it's huge.
I mean, these things just melt away. Like they just disappear.
We keep saying it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a direct cause of eating the wrong thing. You know, of eating plants that cause harm, that cause these autoimmune reactions. And you remove the precipitating factor, which is the, you know, fruits and vegetables and grains, and the problem goes away. This is why, you know, I don't think these diseases are diseases. They're poisonings, they're toxicities, they're and malnutrition, you know. And I think that's starting to gain traction. I've heard more people saying that recently, and I really hope that message continues to go. I think the person that proves that and like shows that clinically that these things are not diseases, these are poisonings, you know, would be deserving of a Nobel Prize in medicine.
Totally. Yeah.
You know, and but that is it. You know, that's you know, my theory anyway. I sort of had an aha moment, sort of like 4 years ago, where all of a sudden it clicked in. I'm like, holy gee, like that's what this is. Like, these aren't diseases. Like, we're just being poisoned, and we're treating poisoning as a disease, and we're trying to get medicine for poison, which, yeah, you can have some medicines that mitigate some toxins, but you don't keep ingesting the toxin. You know, you don't just take medicine and just, oh yeah, you take this medicine and then just keep drinking lead. And like, no. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna have to go.
Okay, all right, well, let's wrap there. Thanks, Anthony. We'll chat again soon.